Welcome to Tanversations. I'm Tanya, a 20 something working in venture capital and excited about the Web3 space. In this podcast, I'm going to be diving into the biggest questions that I have, mostly about work, but also about life and everything in between, by turning to my elders that include venture capitalists, experts, entrepreneurs, writers, philosophers, activists, and even 26-year-olds. So grab your pumpkin spice lattes, kombucha, iced coffee, and 16th other beverage as we go through these conversations together. My guest for today is Geoffrey See, the CEO of Poko, a Y-Combinator backed company. Geoffrey started his career with Bain and then very quickly founded Choson Exchange, a not-for-profit where he trained thousands of female entrepreneurs in North Korea on how to run businesses. His work also led him to become a protagonist for a Harvard Business School case study. While he was in North Korea, he also understood the importance of financial inclusion and got introduced to the world of crypto. In 2018, he drove the launch and go-to-market strategy for a blockchain that led to the formation of a regulated private exchange called HE Exchange, which eventually partially exited to Binance. Now with Poko, he aims to improve the payments infrastructure within Web3, particularly when it comes to gaming. So thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. And so I think we should start with what your journey's been like so far, from where you started off to where you are right now.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. So I'm Geoffrey. I'm the co-founder for a Y-Combinator backed startup called Poko, PokoApp.xyz, and we basically enable merchants to collect payments globally and settle in USDC, and we help them bridge from fiat and local payments into smart contracts. So like issuing NFTs, putting fiat into DeFi protocols and so on. Just a bit of my journey, how I got introduced to this space, to Web3 as it's known now, was really back in 2013 when I was a research affiliate at MIT. And I was working on a nonprofit project where we were helping entrepreneurs in emerging markets learn about business and the market economy. And we were dealing in places where payments was a big problem, where there were a lot of fluctuations in exchange rates, especially some countries where there were currency reforms that literally wiped out the wealth of entire generation of entrepreneurs. That kind of got me interested in Bitcoin because I told my colleagues of this problem, and people were like, "Hey, check out this thing called Bitcoin." So I read the white paper. I thought it was really fascinating, but at that time I didn't believe that that was easy to use. There was something that was ready for use. Fast forward to 2017, I ended up as the chief strategy officer for a company called Anquan, ANQUAN, that basically built and launched a layer one protocol called Zilliqa. We got it up to a $2.4 billion coin cap when I was there. And then on the back of it, we launched an exchange called HGX, which was partially exited to Binance. And I also led this project with the Central Bank of Singapore called Project Ubin. So we were handling one of the phases of Project Ubin, where we were working on experiments around cross-border settlement using blockchain rails. So that kind of got me just very fascinated with the space. Went on to join the Digital Currency Governance Consortium at the World Economic Forum, where I worked a lot on consumer protection issues around this emerging digital currency or crypto space. And I started Poko mainly because I saw how challenging it was for entrepreneurs, especially in all around the world, to collect money from everywhere else, settle it. There's a lot of challenges in terms of settlement time, money being held up in different places, lack of visibility, lack of transparency of where the funds are. In fact, I just have a payment to a contractor on Swift Rails that's been delayed for 3 weeks. One bank blames the other bank, the other bank blames back that bank. And I feel like that's a big part of my motivation is how do we make transparent, kind of like cross-border payments easier and more transparent for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I suffer from this a lot as well. I've had issues with banks so many times. But I think before kind of getting more into your journey within crypto, I did want to kind of take a step back. And I know that you also spent some time in North Korea. So I'd love to kind of know more about that and what was that like for you?
Yeah, so this was a nonprofit that I was involved in and helped founded way back in the days when I was a university student. And it all came about when, I went on a trip to the country. I met a university student there, as, kind of in a final year. And I asked her what she wanted to do when she graduated. And she said she wanted to be a business leader to show that women can be great business leaders. And I was very surprised because one, it was, I always thought it was a very patriarchal country, but here was someone with very strong personal aspirations, wanting to prove something that was personal to her, personal mission. The other part was that it was a communist country, and I thought people there would be, very I would think would have very negative views towards business or the market economy. But I think what I realized was that this was a period of a lot of change in the country where people were starting to see all these Chinese tourists come in and they realized how some of the neighboring countries had changed and people were curious about what could be done to change their domestic economy. So I started this nonprofit to run education programs there. So we teach people about entrepreneurship, and it's still something that I'm proud of, that we have exposed people there to knowledge and training that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to get access to, and we've done it obviously in a sanctions compliant manner. And in fact it was not easy being, I think for the locals there, we really have a lot of respect for them because it's not easy being an entrepreneur in a country that is still ideologically very hostile to some aspects of the concept of entrepreneurship. In fact, one of the reasons why we could start our program was that there was a currency reform, which wiped out the wealth of the entrepreneurial class. Basically, everyone had to change the old currency to the new currency, and they could only change at a limit of, I think, $500.
Yeah, yeah, wow. That's crazy. Yeah, but it must have been quite an experience, right? So does this nonprofit, is it still active or?
Yeah, I think it's still active. I myself am no longer particularly active in it, but we have a team of volunteers that continue to champion some of the work, and also to work with policymakers outside to help them understand, kind of the situation in the country.
Wow, that's incredible. So, just kind of circling back a little bit into your background and how you got into the crypto space. So, when you kind of got in, it wasn't something that was very mainstream. It was still something that was very kind of nascent, and you were kind of, I guess, one of the OGs, especially within Asia. So, at the time, what was your experience like, especially dealing with the government, dealing with central banks and things like that?
Yeah, so the period when I first got to know about it, no one really cared very much about it back then. Governments didn't know what's going on. They didn't pay a lot of attention to it. I think for me, what really sparked my interest was, the currency reform that happened in North Korea kind of made me think a lot about how do you build, in a sense, a global currency that is immune to poor policy decisions. And I think that was the initial motivation for how I approach it. And I think in 2017, 2019, it was kind of interesting because governments at that point were starting to pay attention to the space. And you started seeing more regulations coming in. And I think, and I think especially as time's gone by, there's a lot more attention and with, recent scandals, there's a lot more scrutiny of the sector. I think the one thing that's just progressively gotten harder since I started working on the space is just the interaction between traditional banking rails and cryptocurrency. So, in 2018, 2019, in Singapore, there was all this talk about, oh, the government wants to promote the crypto sector, or at least that's how the media perceived the environment there. But at the same time, when you talk to companies, they all just say, oh, none of the banks would bank us because we are working in the Web3 space, regardless of what exactly we did in the space. And I think that has progressively gotten harder. For many people. But at the same time, I think with increased regulation and as there's more certainty in the space, that also would make things easier for them to have that kind of access to traditional fiat rails.
Yeah. And from back then to now, what the situation is like and how the industry is perceived, like you mentioned, do you feel like there's a big change in terms of how mainstream it's become? Especially in countries like Singapore and you're in Vietnam, so
Yeah.
especially within these two countries.
Yeah, I think it's super exciting, right? I think I would say more from I look from a technology development side because the funny thing is I actually don't trade crypto much. When I first started, back in 2018, we were bringing people to I brought Zilliqa to Vietnam, and we're trying to encourage developers to build on crypto rails, to learn about blockchain and learn about different protocols. And at that point, there was hardly any interest, right? Everyone was like, oh, the money is in making mobile apps. Like, why do I want to learn blockchain? So it took a lot of time. It took a lot of education. Level of interest was growing, but honestly not huge. Now, we even in the down market, we're hiring developers who come to us and just say, "Hey, I want to do this because I want to learn about blockchain. I want to learn how to build blockchain apps, dApps." And the interest continues. So I think on that part, that developer interest is what really excites me. And I think it's the biggest difference on how it has become very mainstream and accepted as a technology that people want to build with.
Yeah. And so can you also talk a little bit more about what your experience was like, with Anquin when you first started, and what was that entire process like for you?
Yeah, I think honestly at the time, no one really know what all this is about, right? I think people were kind of like, it was very technology driven, where the idea behind launching Zilliqa was kind of being the first to implement sharding and increasing the throughput. But no one actually thought a lot about, okay, if we increase the throughput, what are people really going to use this for? So there was a lot of experimentation, a lot of education of different like enterprises that came to us, different use cases. And I think, in hindsight, you can tell like, oh, which cases work and which didn't. And it's always interesting because you'll see now and then someone try to resurrect an old idea. And you're kind of like, oh, I've seen it before. I mean, it didn't work then. I'm not sure if it worked now, but someone have tried this somewhere, in back in 2017, 2018, like a lot of supply chain stuff and all of that. So I think that was quite exciting because back then it was just like no one really knew what's going on. So you just tried different things. And I think it's fun because a lot of my colleagues have gone on to build startups in this space, in different areas, taking the experience they had. So I think that was great because you just really get to meet people who came in early, really believe in the space. And then I think meeting those people at the early stage is very different from meeting people who come in later, where I think when the sector has gotten a lot richer, it attracts a very different profile of people, right? The first batch that we met were all more like missionaries and evangelists. They believed in the space. They had a very strong opinion about it, and I think that was very different from maybe how it is now. That is much more mainstream.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you also find that a lot of those people who came in very early, do you think there's still like people who are deeply part of the industry, or do you think most of them have kind of already built and exited and left?
Yeah. I think it's interesting you mentioned that because I think that cohort of people that came in, actually, I think many of them, many of people I knew from my time then are very much still in the space. And I think the people that came in early were the ones who really stuck around. Um, I would say you have different profiles, right? And people come from corporate backgrounds. Generally, when the industry kind of went sideways, in 2019, a lot of them went back to big tech jobs. So I guess you had a bit of a divergent path, but maybe it's also kind of like a factor of their opportunity sets available to them, right? Like some of them I remember came in from like Google or whatnot, and after they left, they went back to other big tech companies when the industry took a downturn. So I think you have quite divergent path for people. But I think the one who came in very early and really believe in the ethos of the space generally have stuck around.
Okay. Yeah, and I think just kind of talking more about your new venture, so Poko, what does it do exactly?
Yeah. So in short, we enable payments, local payments for Web3 merchants using local payment rails. So it's quite ironic, but most people in the world still pay with fiat, and they pay in the payment methods that are most common to them. And what that means is that a lot of Web3 products and services are just not getting the usage because they're very inaccessible to most users. So what we do is we bridge into smart contracts with fiat payments. So you as a user can say, I want to check out an NFT. You can pay in your local payment method with cards, with bank-to-bank transfers, and you can receive an NFT, or you can pay directly into a DeFi protocol. And in that way, we are trying to kind of grow the space in the market. We have two specific products at the moment. One is an on-ramp aggregator, that enables users to top up wallets or top up their apps. Say they're playing a game, they need to buy tokens, or they are kind of topping up into other flows. And we can do it at a cost that's often up to 70% cheaper than some of the mainstream on-ramps in the world. And then we also enable people to check out NFTs or other Web3 products on local payment rails by connecting kind of Web2 payments into the Web3 space. So games, DeFi, these are all examples of kind of the segments that we're trying to serve in the Web3 space.
Yeah. And do you feel like one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people haven't, gotten into DeFi or it hasn't become very mainstream is because it's so difficult, like, as a user who's not crypto native to like create wallets and then interact with DeFi protocol, things like that. It's just so difficult. But do you think, there's a need for that bridge kind of a thing what you're building with Poko? Like, do you feel like that's
Yeah,
one of the biggest reasons why it has been adopted in a more mainstream way, or there's still other reasons?
Yeah, I think you're right in the sense that the word we hear from a lot of users, a lot of gamers in the Web3 gaming space has always been seamless, like simple and seamless. So they want to be able to pay and buy, a product, an in-game asset, a service, the same way they would any other products. You go there, you swipe a card, you key in your card details, you pay with like you scan a QR code and you do a bank transfer. Instead, now often they have to go to an exchange, figure out how to get dollars to the exchange, get tokens, withdraw the tokens to a wallet, use the wallet to go buy a product. And I think that is a very poor user experience. And we want to make that on-ramping process easier because we know from experience that simplicity and ease of on-ramping and onboarding is a big driver of adoption. Yeah, and we've seen it like my co-founder used to lead Netflix growth for Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand. And it's all the very same concept, right? So how do you bring that playbook around simple, easy to use, simple to on-ramp, accessible, in order to grow a sector? And I think that's important for the Web3 space.
Yeah. Is that like a key trend that you would presume is going to come up in the next cycle, or are there other trends that you're kind of bullish on within the space?
Yeah, so I think for me, I think that's what's exciting to me personally versus, where I believe this sector will go, right? As mentioned, I'm not a trader. I don't actually trade much crypto. So my guess is as good as anyone. What I would say I am personally excited about is how Web3, the intersection of Web3 and payments, how it enables new model and access to services that are otherwise hard to get. So an example, I think, is play to earn games. Even though the industry is obviously slumped a little bit, I think that ability to have gaming models where there's an economic angle to it, there's the ability to both pay in and pay out very easily at low cost, I think is very transformative in terms of engaging new user base around the world. I think the ability to access, say, things like financial services, especially in emerging markets, and enabling that to happen, I think is amazing. Because I think all too often, in many emerging markets, these sectors tend to be very underdeveloped or tend to be very cozy, right? Most emerging markets don't support, say, that many banks or that many financial institutions. So can you build something that is more global, that maybe gives more options to consumers? I think that is also very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very excited to kind of see where you take this company. So I think those are all the questions that I had. Would really appreciate you coming on and doing this interview.
Yeah, thanks so much. Looking forward to kind of hearing the interview and also kind of hearing what other interesting stories you bring to the table around the Web3 space.
Okay. So I'll just cut it out here. But thank you so much for doing this. It was
Yeah,
okay. It wasn't very choppy or anything like that, but I really
yeah.
appreciate that. And I actually really quickly also wanted to ask you. So basically I started from like a VC background and then kind of got into the crypto space. So right now I'm working with this company. I'm not sure if you know them. It's called Treehouse. and they're kind of a DeFi analytics platform. So I'm doing marketing for them. So it's like a competitor to Nansen.
Yep.
And but I'm actually also actively looking for jobs. So within like marketing growth community, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So I was wondering if you are hiring or looking to hire, because I
Yeah.
just think,
Yes. So the team now is quite small. We are only hiring devs, but I think you may want to check with a place like Circle. I think
okay,
Circle is expanding quite a bit. I know they are hiring marketing. I think it's more like sales driven, but I would say that's one of the places if you're looking in the Web3 space might be worth speaking to. That I think might not be a bad place to join. Yeah,
okay. Yeah, I
yeah.
think
So I
for
think check out
me,
Circle.
it's less about the company, it's just more about the kind of people that I work with. And obviously, one of the reasons that I really wanted to do this interview is because I just think you're a very interesting person. So for me, like the goal would be to like be able to learn from you and
Yeah,
yeah. So that was my kind of
yeah. Yeah, thanks. I mean, super appreciate it. Just I think we're not hiring at the moment. We're keeping the burn fairly constrained. Just because it takes time to find product market fit,
yeah.
and so our priorities now is basically really focus on marketing at the moment. If things change, would love to reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Okay. Yeah, I'll
Um,
keep you posted on when I publish those.
okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks again for doing the interview. All right.